I'm Alice De Coverley. I'm a barrister at Three Paper Buildings in London, and I'm a specialist education, equality, and public law barrister. And I am particularly interested, hence the series, in how artificial intelligence will affect my area of practice, and in particular in the education sector and in education law, which is, as many of you will know, a very broad area of law within that sector, covering both private and public law and discrimination issues. It's a broad church. So in this seminar, I'm going to introduce you to artificial intelligence and go over a number of those key concepts. What is it? What's it mean? What are all of these different terms that are coming up? Everyone's talking about it. And then I want to give us a bit of an introduction into how I have seen this arise so far in the education world, and signpost to some of the things I'll be talking about in future sessions about the risks and the positives that I'm seeing, and I think we need to be very prepared for in the coming weeks and months, because it is changing so fast. As Delphina said in the chat, there's going to be the opportunity for you to ask questions, and please do, if I can't answer all of those during the time that we've got, please do email me. I'm very interested in this topic, and I'm really happy to have a chat with anyone who wants to talk further about this issue as it's coming up in the settings and with the parents and young people who you may be working with. The session should last, I'm hoping that my session should be about 45 minutes with time for questions. It could take a bit longer, but we'll see how we get on, but we're listed here for that hour. So thank you so much to everybody coming along this morning. So the basics of AI. What is it? What does it do? And why is everybody talking about it? So AI was the Collins Dictionary word of the year in 2023. It was described as, the definition given was, the modeling of human mental functions by computer programs. And of course, AI is not technically a word, but it's an initialism. And much like everything to do with AI that I have seen so far, its meaning is hotly contested. But by 2023, and certainly by March 23, when ChatGPT was released, which I'll come to if you don't know what that is yet, it's very much a thing. It's very much here in our society, and certainly something that we need to be thinking about very carefully. Lots of questions have come up. Will AI save us? Will it steal our jobs? Will it make us more productive? Will it destroy humankind? Many questions. The UK government was pretty live to it last year and concerned in some ways. So in 2023, they organised an AI safety summit at Bletchley Park, harking back to the country's time as code breakers of World War II. Tech bros love AI. Many countries want to be the leaders of artificial intelligence and innovation, tech innovation. And for fans of technology and sci-fi, it's been pretty exciting. You can now use large language models, and again, I'll come to that definition later, to write your emails, help plan your day, compose music, give you ideas for articles, write those articles, create personalized fitness plans, automate routine business processes, summarize or translate difficult texts, and use chatbots to support your mental health. The list is endless for personal use and business use. It's also being used to aid medical diagnosis, to aid lawyers, to play chess. It's used in military campaigns as well, and its uses are vast. We also have seen dark sides. So in elections, we've seen disinformation, and on social media, disinformation too. We've got deepfakes, and again, I'll come to the definition of a deepfake. And we've also seen the use of disastrous or even discriminatory algorithms weighing into the mix used by these computer programs. Artists, writers, photographers as well have expressed, not all of them, but have expressed upset at the erosion of human creativity or the loss of human creativity. Others have seen it as an amazing form of innovation. And there's also undoubtedly a safeguarding crisis already with artificial intelligence in the growth of things like child pornography images that are generated by artificial intelligence. And so at times you may feel like this topic is pretty overwhelming. But much of artificial intelligence is also quite boring, and it has been here for quite a lot longer than just in the last year. It's just that everyone started talking about it. So you use AI to order from Ocado online. You used AI when AI decided that you weren't eligible for that loan. That chatbot you used to try and sort out your electricity bill that made you want to destroy your phone, that was an AI, that was a language model that was speaking with you as the user. So it's already here, it's been here for some time, and in my view, it's really important that practitioners who work in the law, full stop, need to be aware of it. But I think it's of particular interest in its application to children and young people, for disabled young people and adults, and also in relation to how it is manifesting in schools and in universities. I couldn't possibly cover everything in this one session: the ethics of AI, the risks and breadth of AI, the law of AI. I'll do a little introduction to that, but there's so much to learn here. So the next couple of sessions, I'll also be talking about some of those wider conceptual issues too. But in this session, I want to talk about the basics in terms of definitions, and then how I am seeing it arise in schools and in universities. So, sir, first of all, some basics in terms of the terminology. So some of you will be familiar with this terminology, and others, this may be the first time we've seen these phrases. So artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is referring to a hypothetical intelligent machine that has achieved a level of cognitive performance across a broad or unlimited range of tasks that usually require human intelligence. So it's a mimicry of human abilities, a robot that can think like a human, but without, don't confuse it with consciousness, but it's effectively, they're able to do something that usually would require human intelligence. Then we have generative AI. So this is something that we've heard quite a lot more about in the last year. This is what's capable of generating text or images or other media. And these are trained on or developed from existing data. So you would have seen things like images of Donald Trump riding a horse with Obama on his back, that sort of thing, creating these images. And those images are generated on platforms like DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E. And then we have language models like GPT as a whole, and ChatGPT is a specific form of that as well. Machine learning. So this is the use and development of computer systems that are able to learn and adapt without following explicit instructions from humans. So they use algorithms to create statistical models that capture and draw inference from patterns in data. So basically, you're giving a computer lots of examples of something, so then it finds the patterns itself, and it can do it itself, and it practices that, and the better it can then become at predicting things without needing that human input. So machine learning, that's an important feature of the fact that this is a snowballing of progress in this area, that we have this concept of machine learning. Neural networks. So this is effectively the way in which quite a lot of these things are being made, is mimicking the way the human brain works. So the computer systems that are being built on are inspired by the way the human brain works. So for example, if you are imagining trying to recognize a cat in a picture, the first thing you might be thinking about is focusing on the edges and the shapes. And the next layer might look at like more complex features such as fur or eyes. And then the network, so the next layer said, yes, that's a cat. And then the next network might say, well, the cat might have a name. It's that sort of thing. So it's looking at creating something like a picture and following a similar kind of pattern that a brain might do in designing it. And then you can imagine that the code might then follow a similar pattern. And then you get the model to effectively learn this by looking at lots of cat pictures and figuring out what features the most. So, you know, the fur, the tail, the eyes and ears and so on. And it's quite similar to teaching a baby to recognize a cat's image. So showing them loads and loads of examples, and over time, the baby or the young person gets used to identifying them, even with new pictures that they've not seen before. That's how neural network. That's what neural networks mean. Language models and large language models. Now, this is probably the main thing that you may have come across in the last year or so. So, language models are computer systems that use statistical or probabilistic techniques to determine the likelihood of a series of words forming a sentence trained on existing data. In other words, think about something like a word predictor on your phone or on Microsoft Word. So you know how the next word often comes up that's actually the word that you wanted. It might not be, but it might not be, but it might be the word you actually want. It's making it smoother for you in writing. That's a language model. So it's predicting the likelihood of the word that's next. We actually use that, and we've been using that for a number of years. And certainly the latest Microsoft Word has that built in. A large language model is effectively a much more complex version of this, with a huge amount more data. So not just the English language, for example, in Microsoft Word, but the whole of Wikipedia in every language, at least. So ChatGPT, which is also on the list, this is a language model, a large language model. And this is apparently trained on trillions of words across different domains and language. And actually, we can't know exactly how much data it's trained on, because we aren't privy to that information. It's company secret. So that's what a large language model is. I'll come to ChatGPT first and come back to Singularity. So ChatGPT, this is, as I said, a language model. And effectively, you type into it. It's an app, or it's on the website, web format, or you can go on it on your phone, and you type into it, ask it to do something, say, summarize this text, and list key questions for discussion, or can you explain singularity to me like I'm 5, and break it down into accessible language. It will do so, and it will do so instantly. It's typed out gradually to give you the illusion that it's a natural conversation, but the response is generated instantly. And ChatGPT was only launched in March 2023, and we're seeing multiple versions of this come out every few months. And the latest, I think, is ChatGPT 4.0. And it's quite amazing at what it would do. And I would encourage all of you to experiment with it and see what you can ask it to do for you in your day-to-day work. So with Singularity, this is the time at which artificial general intelligence surpasses human intelligence. So it's an idea about some point in the future where computers are cleverer than us. Think about The Matrix or films like Her. And then a couple of more phrases. Prompts. These are the things that you effectively type into the language model. So the question that you might give ChatGPT, or the prompt that you might give ChatGPT to ask it to do something. And lots of people have designed or experimented with quite complex and sophisticated and clever prompts, which are worth looking into for specific tasks. So if you want to do something with, say, a witness statement or something like that, you might want to think about a structure. Have a look, because there's loads of different people who have designed different prompts for different tasks. Deepfakes, now this is particularly relevant for child safeguarding and safeguarding of women and girls in particular. This is AI generated synthetic media where someone's likeness to their face, their voice, is replaced or manipulated in photos or videos or audio to create realistic but fake content. So this is used for harmless entertainment, but it can also be used for malicious purposes, and it is being used for malicious purposes like misinformation or fraud. So we have already got phone calls being made by a distressed child that you thought was doing okay on holiday, saying, "Mummy, please send me £500 to my friend's account because I've lost all of my cards." And that kid sounds exactly like yours. And the parent believing that. This is where this is becoming worrying, and it is being used already in online and on social media. And then finally, hallucinations. This isn't all of the terminology that exists, but this is, I hope, the most useful. Hallucinations. This is where the language model, the AI, generates something that looks right, but actually is nonsense. So it generates something that is incorrect, fabricated, or like nonsensical, even though it might appear plausible. And this can often happen where text-based AI models respond with false information that wasn't part of their training. And something that's been doing the rounds quite recently is asking ChatGPT, it's probably been corrected by now, but how many R's there are in strawberry. And it just couldn't answer this question. And it was getting stuck. But it may also be in cases where, for example, lawyers or judges have tried to use ChatGPT to write judgments, and the judgments just don't make sense because they include these hallucinations and they haven't been double checked. So that is a very quick summary of the terminology that may be useful to you. So the law of AI. There are some textbooks, some very good textbooks, and some other pop science books that have been produced if you go to any bookshop now. But in short, in terms of the law, there's very little law of AI in England and Wales currently. We'll definitely see that change, but currently there isn't. There's no generic AI statute. There's no specific rules governing liability for AI or equivalent of the EU's AI Act. So, which, by the way, was released very recently, and that establishes a risk-based regulatory framework for AI. It's all about accountability across the EU, but of course, not going to be applicable to England and Wales anymore. But it's very risk-based. It's like it imposes obligations on those who run AI applications that are high risk to ensure safety, transparency, and accountability. So there is some regulatory legislation out there, certainly in the EU and certainly in other countries like China. They have got some heavy regulation there too, but not here. But pockets of law are growing in particular areas that may not be surprising. So in one is in autonomous vehicles, so vehicles that can self-drive, Teslas and so on. Copyright patents, that is also an area. So what happens with things that are created by AI but are based on someone else's work? You know, if you have the model creates, say, Adele singing a Frank Sinatra song, or the other way around, you know, who owns what, who's the owner of that? You can imagine that there's some interesting developments in copyright and patent IP law. And then we also have existing law. GDPR is probably the main big thing for data protection that protects specifically, as you may know, there's carve-outs in particular for children, and particularly also public authorities and so on as well. So data protection legislation, of course, already exists, which, although it doesn't include specific reference to all the different types of AI that I was talking about, it does exist at the moment, and is for lots of the things that will come up is going to be the best thing to look at. But it doesn't exist outside of the law. So there is, as I say, little legislation and case law about AI, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist outside of it. It doesn't mean it exists outside of the law or that normal legal principles don't apply. So, and the reason for this is, for example, if you think about things like how the common law evolves, we think about, for example, how we've established liability for secondary victims of someone else's negligence and things like that. So the way in which the tort law, for example, incrementally grows to new situations. Human rights law is another example of something that might incrementally adapt to new areas of law without the need for legislation, because it's broadly set. I mean, certainly in relation to things like common law, that's, I think, an area where, we've got it's just about the commercial law principles, the common law principles are the same. It's just the product that's different. GPT versus OpenAI, whatever it is. The product is different, but the principles are the same. The issues, I think, as well, that again already exist will be in terms of professional liability. So if AI is used by lawyers, doctors, architects, teachers, and so on, and then it's used in a way that could cause damage or be a breach of contract and so on. I mean, you could imagine, again, existing professional liability, those principles would apply. Liability may attach to people who design the program of AI. We can imagine the developers of AI, the consumers of AI, suing left, right, and centre. Data protection and privacy, as I said, when we've got things like deepfakes as well going around, I can imagine that if anyone does family law, and I'm speaking to some colleagues of mine, they're already seeing those sorts of images appear in harassment type cases in the family courts. So, and again, you can imagine that the family court may not be fully equipped to deal with it, but certainly would have the right kind of principles to manage harassment, and it can reach the ordinary definition of harassment as well. And criminal lawyers too are dealing with scams involving AI, like I said, that phone call from a child who's abroad, and then indecent images of children too. So and that legislation already exists, as well as the online safety bill, which I will talk about later on. And then I think as well, human rights framework is there too. It's not perfect. None of this specifically sets out AI, and as I say, the case law, certainly in relation to education, it doesn't exist yet, but it will. So how is AI then coming up in the education arena? So lots of different things on this page. The COVID pandemic, in my view, marks quite a clear shift in how technology was used in schools and in universities, and by children and by adults as well. Remote learning, Google Classroom, all these words became completely normal. It revealed a lot of inequalities in accessing technology, with some children being without laptops, without technology that they could access or afford. Many of you will have done cases involving children with special educational needs or disabilities who didn't have appropriate adaptations or reasonable adjustments to the technology that they used to learn. We also had, during COVID, and some of you may have had children or experienced yourself, the mess up, let's say, of Ofqual's use of algorithms in dealing with grades for GCSE and A level grades. And this was a case. I was instructed in legal action in this, and if you remember, there were these predictive techniques used by Ofqual to determine exam results, and the arguments were that this was resulting in unfairness and discrimination. There's algorithms. This is AI. This is AI. And the algorithm had low accuracy because it relied on 3 different inputs into the machine: historical grade distribution of the school, the rank of the child within the school, you may remember, and the previous exam results that it had. And what that meant was loads of different things, but one thing it meant was that if nobody at the school had previously received an A grade in, say, further maths, it was extremely unlikely to impossible, using the algorithm of this machine, that a student could obtain an A grade that year in further maths. It just wasn't going to be possible, even if actually that child would very much obtain that grade because of their own natural ability. And following that legal action, the government retracted the use of the algorithm, which was heavily criticised by both lawyers and statisticians, and reverted to accepting the teacher assessed grade. There were problems with that as well, for various reasons, but this was a very clear example of the use of algorithms gone wrong. And we also know that AI is being used a lot by children. ChatGPT, the chatbot that I was talking about, isn't restricted to adults, can be used by children. And I'm going to touch on that in a lot more detail in my next two seminars, which look at those risks in more detail. But what we are seeing in a positive way or a negative way, depending on how they are used, is teachers, lecturers, as well as students and pupils using AI as a tool. So they may use AI products to help with marking, to help generate lecture materials, to help generate class room discussions, to structure homework sessions, to work on school timetables. I mean, if any of you are teaching staff, you'll know how difficult it is to timetable 3 form entries in a secondary school, all doing loads of different classes all at once. If you can put all of that information into a machine and get something else to do that, and to do it accurately, you've massively freed up time, and then the teachers can get on with the teaching. And that's going to be very useful. So to be able to automate some of that, and that's happening currently. What I think the kind of thing that the government is doing, and certainly they've talked about this, is if they want to cut teachers' workload, because they recognise the strain on teachers, and effectively saying we want to promote AI as a sort of assistant to teachers. So I think it will be, and is continuing to be, promoted for teachers. It's also being used by pupils in some ways, not completely. I'm not seeing that as much, but it could be used, and I'll come back to it, for children with special educational needs, in particular, in structuring their time. But we are also seeing, and certainly more so in the higher education and university sector, concerns about plagiarism, concerns about academic integrity, where you're using a large language model to write that difficult essay on philosophy, on history, on whatever, and generating content that can look unique, but actually is capable of being detected by machines that also review that text to see whether or not it's been AI generated or human generated, and then that student being flagged for plagiarism. And what is difficult is, what is the line between asking ChatGPT to give you some ideas, like to start, what on earth do I say about the 5 features that cause this particular outbreak or this war or whatever? I can't think. And then they just give you 5 things to think about. Is that cheating? Or is it just cheating when you get the model to write you the whole essay? We also see students, particularly students who need additional literacy support, dyslexic students, using Grammarly, putting it in, and Grammarly helps you to rewrite things to make things clearer, spell checks, looks at the grammar, and so on. Is that cheating? If you're also effectively being tested on how you write, how you argue, as well as the content of what you are saying in those essays, the lines are not going to be clear. So lots of universities are now reacting to this and creating policies that are going to manage how and when AI can be used. And most at the moment, I don't seem to be saying that no AI and blanket bans, and are encouraging sensible use. But I think it's going to be a very difficult and blurred area going forward. And the other thing is about academic integrity. So there's 2 schools of thought on this. Firstly, we've got the fact that the only thing that the language model is producing, large language model is producing, is from existing data. It's not creating arguably new ideas. It's taking other people's ideas and then regenerating them. The other way of looking at it is that it can create ideas that you can't even imagine, that are very new and very clever. You can ask it to rewrite a Friends episode in the tone of Coronation Street. And probably, whoever's thought of that thought, I don't know, I just made it up. But you can imagine something quite interesting made up on the spot, and as I say, instantly. So there's definitely a debate about, well, that's stealing two existing ideas, but it's also creating something that's new. So I think that's an area that we're going to see some really interesting difficulties in. Online safety and use by children. So a bit of a much sadder note. Some of you may remember Molly Russell, who is a girl who very sadly took her life from an act of self-harm after suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content. And there was a inquest into her death, where online and social media was the heart of what was looked at by the coroner. And the Prevention of Future Deaths report, which is something that some coroners produce if it's needed, set out a number of different recommendations and identified Molly as a vulnerable young person because of her mental health needs, and also identify that those algorithms used by platforms like Instagram and now TikTok resulted in binge periods of looking at images and videos and text, some of which she had selected because she'd searched for it, but some of which had just come up through the algorithm and got darker and darker and took her down a different path. Some of it was very graphic about self-harm. And the coroner found that this contributed to her death and made a series of recommendations, including about the regulation of online material and the protection of children by these social media companies, organizations. And one of the things that this resulted in was the online safety bill, which is legislation that I'll talk about in more detail next time. But that was a very specific and positive outcome in very dark circumstances to that the inquest. But certainly many of you will be worried about screen time for children and excessive use of TikTok and so on by young people as well, and adults addicted to their phones. There's definitely a wider question about mobile phones. And we know that many schools have got mobile phone policies, blanket policies on banning them. Certainly the Department for Education is very keen on banning mobile phone use by schools and has produced non-statutory guidance on that. But I think that's going to become an even heavier requirement on schools going forward. On the other hand, what we can see as well is that it's got some real utility. So can it enhance learning? Can it help tired teachers to think of really cool and interesting lesson plans for children who are a bit bored of learning about Shakespeare? Can they update it? Can ChatGPT write a Shakespeare lesson plan that uses slang used by Generation Z? Maybe, probably, it definitely can. And that could make it really interesting and fun. And the other thing related to that is that we are seeing an absolute explosion of technology and products, particularly in the home education world, particularly in gaming, particularly in the sorts of things that some of your kids might be into, Roblox, Minecraft, etc., where these entire online worlds that are teaching children about social skills, about building, about engineering, about teamwork. We have all of these online things that are being used, these computer programs are being used by young people that are enhancing their learning, that are providing mentorship, that are providing social communication skills to them. So certainly a huge amount of positives that we're seeing too. On the other hand, as I say, there's a question mark about whether or not it is reducing some critical thinking. If you can go home and do your homework and just plod the answers into AI, into ChatGPT program, and then you get the answers, back from that, and you've done your homework, you're not really thinking about it as a young person, and that's a risk too. And it may be difficult for the teacher to know whether or not that's been used, and things may well be missed. Something else to note in relation to use of online and cyberbullying, those sorts of issues, keeping children safe in education. Whilst it doesn't, I searched it, it doesn't reference artificial intelligence. It does, of course, reference the internet and cyberbullying, online safety and monitoring and so on, and the Online Safety Act. But the KICSI is keeping children safe in education is updated very regularly. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next annual updates we see something specifically about this. And certainly we will, I think, see more about the use of images generated by others, and how they might be managed by a school that's trying to deal with suppressing those images being circulated. And as I said at the start, one of the other quite interesting uses of ChatGPT and those sorts of models is that many people are using these as therapists. So you can talk to ChatGPT and say, I've had a terrible day, and you can ask it to talk to you like a lovely, kind auntie, and you can have a conversation with it, and it can help you work out things that you might need. Now, is that at the expense of a trained therapist who's going to be able to do something about particular things that you might raise if you're suicidal, for example, and actually be able to assist in that time of crisis? It's unlikely, but lots of these huge data sets are going to be trained on using CBT and so on. We may start seeing these sorts of apps recommended in lieu of services that are under immeasurable strain. CAMS, for example, I'm sure would love to outsource itself to robots because they don't have enough support for children and young people available. So that's I think is also an interesting angle on things, but I don't. I think that there could be some real liability issues that come up in that sphere too. But ending again on a kind of positive, we are seeing children with special education needs in particular using these tools to help with executive functioning. I've seen teachers use it for differentiating and making classroom activities more accessible too. So there's a huge amount that I think we are seeing already, and that we are going to certainly see on the horizon in this field. The second seminar is going to cover this in more detail, so the benefits of AI in education, existing law and regulation. I'm going to go into much more granular detail about data protection and privacy, safeguarding, that conventional AI, Human Rights Act, and how that's dealing with issues more broadly in AI. I want to look at what the government's currently doing and what guidance they're giving. So both the Department for Education and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, that may have been renamed, and look at also some real life case studies as well. So if any of you have got any examples of AI being used by clients or in your settings, I'd be really interested in hearing them. And then in the third seminar, I'm going to look at the risks and challenges and the gaps that we've got currently in the regulatory and legal frameworks that exist at the moment. And I've got a section in that about, for example, what happens if, for those who deal with special educational needs, if we start seeing AI generated EHC plans, if we start seeing judges use AI to generate judgments in the tribunal or in the courts. We have actually seen that being used already in the US and in other countries, and maybe here. So plenty to think about in this area.